Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 684, and today's date is June 3rd, 2015, and the title of this episode is EU orders 11 countries to enact bail-in rules within 2 months. Now, before I get started, I just wanted to let everyone know tomorrow, which is Thursday, I will be uploading the interview with Dabu7. If you're on the X22 Report email alert system, you'll get an email. If you're subscribed to YouTube on the X22 Report Spotlight channel, which is a separate channel from X22 Report, you should receive an email from YouTube. If you're not on either of these systems, you can subscribe to either one of them, or just go to YouTube and type in X22 Report Spotlight, or you can come to the x22report.com site. You will see the video on the right-hand side, and you can watch the interview from there. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand there have been days upon days where Greece is sitting there saying, yes, they can make this payment, no problem. They're scrounging around, trying to find the funds, and there are certain outlets out there telling us that absolutely not. Greece is completely broke. I'm one of them. I think they're completely broke. They don't have any funds. Last time they made the payment, they had to dip into the emergency SDRs from the IMF just to make that payment. And we're seeing that the Greek officials are continually saying that, yes, they can make this payment, but we're hearing from a Syria spokesman, and they're saying, listen, if there's no deal inked within the next 48 hours, Greece will definitely miss that Friday payment. And we understand that the IMF said that, yes, they can miss that payment as long as they make up all the payments by the end of the month. And we can see that this is falling right into this. The ECB has increased the emergency liquidity assistance, ELA, provided to the Greek banks by 500 million euros to 80.7 billion euros from 80.2. So this is very interesting what's going on here. And then we have the French president, President Hollande. He's out there saying it is a matter of a few days. We are a few hours away from a possible settlement. He also added that when they decide to settle all this and they come to an agreement, Greece will return to growth. You mean just like France? France is not growing. France is collapsing. Unemployment is going up. So can we really believe the French president at this time? I really don't think so. Could there be a deal? Maybe so, but we're going to have to see what this deal is, because if it includes austerity, dipping into the pensions, reforming them, or anything like that, there's going to be a huge, huge problem, especially with the people, because they elected this government because they didn't want more austerity. They wanted economic growth. They wanted jobs. They wanted a house. They wanted to be able to pay for their bills. They just wanted to live without any of these problems. And this is all they wanted. This is what any of us want. We just want to be left alone. We want to live our lives. We want to work. We want to make a good income. We want to support our families. That's it. That's all we're looking for. And to be at peace. We see the president of the Confederal Group of the European United Left is saying that austerity increases debt. It does not lead to economic growth, and I completely agree. This is coming from Gabriel Zimmer, saying the debt problem can be resolved first and foremost by ending the austerity policy. And this is one of the reasons debt is augmenting. Because when you have this austerity, people are not working. The government is taking on more debt. And as they take on more debt, they ruin their revenue stream. And this has been proven now. When we look at France, when we look at Greece, when we look at Cyprus, when we look at Italy, it is a fact. Getting more debt and getting rid of jobs does not work. We see the Eurozone. It looks like they're using the same calculations as the BLS here in the United States. Unemployment in the Eurozone fell to 11.1% in April. This is the lowest rate in 3 years. The jobless rate in April was down from 11.2% in March, but you have to remember the March figure was revised downward from 11.3. So it looks like they're starting to use the manipulated calculations. Actually, they've probably most likely been using manipulated calculations all this time, and now they're just manipulating them some more because the numbers aren't making sense. So they have to show that unemployment is decreasing, especially when we've been showing unemployment, especially in France, has increased. So we can see at this point in time, the Eurozone is in big trouble at this time. We understand the ECB is out there creating money out of thin air, just like the Fed did, and this does not spur economic growth whatsoever. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, ADP came out with their employment numbers, and having fallen for 5 straight months and missed expectations for the last 4, we see May's 201,000 print was a little bit above the 200,000 that was expected. This was a modest bounce. And of course, the corporate media is out there saying, we're in a full-time recovery, everything is fine. But you have to remember, how many more layoffs are coming down the line? Just because a company announced a layoff today doesn't mean they laid off all the people today. It's going to go on throughout this year, and we've had huge layoffs coming. And we can see when we look at these numbers that the large firms, firms that have 500 or more, actually saw jobs shed. We see manufacturing jobs have declined for the 3rd month in a row. So we were in a downward trend of jobs. If we go back to November of 2014, we saw 284,000. January of 2015, 220,000. March, 176,000. April, 165,000. And then all of a sudden, everyone decided we need to get a job, and we bounced up to 201,000. How is this possible? All of a sudden, people are getting jobs. Now, you have to remember how they count this. They still do. And they are always going to count it this way until they manipulate it some more and they change it. But they are counting part-time jobs as full-time jobs. So as more and more people go out into the workforce, getting laid off from their full-time work, and they get these part-time jobs, they are counted as having a full-time job. We see here in the United States, auto sales have reached 10-year highs. How in the world is this possible? Does this mean that we're in this incredible recovery? Does this mean that everything is fine? No, because when you look at the entire situation in auto sales, you see how they did it. And we see the experienced Senior Director of Automotive Finance, Melinda Zabritsky, said extending the loan term is simply the most logical way for borrowers to buy cars they can't really afford. What? Most longer-term loans help consumers keep monthly payments manageable while allowing them to purchase the vehicles they need without having to break the bank. In other words, either car buyers are overreaching as home buyers did back before 2008, or the American consumer is completely tapped out in real bad shape, and the only way they can get any of these cars is to extend the loan terms. And either of these situations it's not good. It's actually a terrible situation. The average loan term right now for a car is about 67 months. Loan terms with 74 to 84 months made up around 30% of all new vehicle financing. And when we look at this, 1/5 of all loans in the collateral pool are made to borrowers with FICO scores between 350 and 500. Actually, when we look at this, we see people who have no scores whatsoever. That was about 15% of the loans. 351 to 500 made up about 19%. 501 to 550 made up about 29%. And 550 to 600 was another 26%. And we can see that the rate of delinquencies is increasingly rising. It's getting harder and harder for these people to make the payments. And this is why they're continually extending the loans here, because the payments are just too high. Think about it. You came from a full-time job. You work in a part-time job. You need an automobile that's reliable to get to work. How can you make the payments? Well, you extend the term. And now you're paying out over 7, 8, 9 years. Pretty soon it'll be 12 years as things get worse and worse as time goes on. But perhaps the best bubble indicator of all is the rise of the cash-out auto loan. Use your car as collateral, or equity loan can help put your car to work for you. The cash-out loan is the new home equity loan. Welcome to the great American car bubble here. This bubble is being inflated along with the student loan bubble, the stock market bubble, the derivative bubble, the housing bubble, the bond bubble, you name it. Each one of these, we are in a major bubble. This is a perfect storm of bubbles, and they will pop. We're even seeing a tech sector bubble, just like we saw back in 2001. Market services PMI in May missed expectations and dropped for the second month in a row to its lowest since January. Slowing service sector growth adds to signs that the U.S. economy has lost some momentum. Actually, the economy didn't lose any momentum. It never had momentum. The people, the consumers, are not driving the economy anymore. It is the central bank that is driving everything with the help of the government. The consumers are left out in the cold because they cannot keep this economy going. So this is why we're seeing all these bubbles. This is why we see factory orders declining, because the American people, they just don't have the funds to go out and purchase goods. If they're not purchasing goods, companies do not have to order. The companies don't have to order from the factories. The factories don't need the raw materials. And this is why we see the Baltic Dry Index still under 600 points. We see from the last housing bubble fallout, the elderly and the renters were hit the most. 30% of homeowners 65 and older, some 6.5 million Americans, were still paying a mortgage in 2013, and they're still paying it in 2015. When we compare this back to 2011, that was 22%. And according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau figures, the median mortgage held by seniors has more than doubled since 2001, from 43,000 to 88,000. The number of Americans 75 and older still are paying off home loans, and they rose 21%. And they were just 8% a decade before. This tells us we're in a huge amount of trouble here. The elderly need to work to continually pay off their loans. They can't retire at this point. This is why we see a lot of them taking part-time positions, because they cannot afford the inflationary costs of food. As food continually rises and their retirement stays steady, they can't make ends meet, and this is why they go out and they get a part-time job. It's getting harder and harder for people to survive. We see weekly mortgage applications plunged again by 7.6%. This is the week ending May 29th, and this is coming from the Mortgage Bankers Association. So every week so far, we've seen the mortgage applications decline, and this is just a little tick up of the interest rates. Can you imagine if the interest rates tick up 0.5%, 0.25%? How many people are going to be kicked out of the housing market? This will cripple the housing market. It will destroy it. We saw this back in 2007 going into 2008. All those people that had adjustable rate mortgages where their rates adjusted to whatever the rate was of that day, well, when the rates started going up, it completely kicked people out of the payment area. It was too much for them, so they had to leave the homes. Even if they locked in at that point, they couldn't do it. They couldn't make the payment, and they knew it. And the rates were continually going up and up and up, and the real estate market was getting worse and worse as time went on. And we know that we're headed towards the same exact thing that we saw in 2008, but it's going to be a lot worse. We're seeing countries, and we've talked about this before, they are preparing bail-in documents. They've already prepared them. They have to put them into law. They have to make sure everything is ready to go. We understand the United States is ready, UK, Canada. But we're seeing the European Commission has now ordered 11 EU countries to enact the Bank Recovery and Resolution Directive, the BRRD, within 2 months or be hauled before the EU Court of Justice. 11 countries are under pressure from the EC and had yet to fall in line. The countries were Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Romania, Sweden, Luxembourg, Netherlands, France, and Italy. Right now, as we know, France and Italy have very fragile banking systems. The rules known as the Bank Recovery and Resolution Directive shield the taxpayers from the fallout of another banking crisis. Well, does it really shield them? Or the law says the government cannot bail out the banks? That's what it really says. It's not shielding anyone, because what are they going to do? Well, they're going to go inside the bank and take your money directly. I don't know, is that really helping the everyday person? And a lot of these countries, those who were depositors are now creditors. And you're included in the creditor and shareholders who are going to contribute to the rescue of the banks, which is known as bail-ins. We saw this occur in Cyprus. In Austria, we know that creditors now also include depositors of banks, and this is happening with many countries. Here in the United States, yes, those people who are depositors are now creditors. The bail-in legislation, which is being driven by the BIS through the Bank of England, ECB, Federal Reserve, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, appears designed to protect banks by allowing them to confiscate deposits to prop them up when there is some type of collapse. And we can see they want all banks ready to go. They want all countries ready to go. Why did they pick the next 2 months? Well, we know things are really falling apart right now. We know the United States economy, the European economy, they're all pumped up, they're all bubbles. It's not driven by the consumer. It's not driven by the people of the countries. And they realize they're heading down a path where they can't sustain this anymore. It's completely falling apart. And we see that without these bail-in documents, the banks are going to implode on themselves. But again, everything the central bankers do, it does not help the people. Remember, the central bankers have no allegiance to a people or a country. Their allegiance is to themselves and to profit and to pushing debt onto countries and onto the people, because that's their product. So when this moves forward and we're in this collapse scenario and they enact the bail-in laws, people are going to be shocked. This is why we say, and this is what I'm doing, only keep the amount that you need to pay your bills. This is my opinion, and this is what I do. So I would use that type of approach at this point in time, because you never know when it's going to happen. Because one day, just like the Cyprus people, you can wake up and you can go to your bank and they can say, well, I'm sorry, at this point in time, the banks are closed. And when they reopen, you cannot take out the money that you have in the banks because we're under capital controls. And in Cyprus, it went on for longer than a year. And the money that they took was 47%, or I should say the currency they took was 47%. And they replaced it with worthless bank stock. Why would you want the bank stock if the banks are imploding on themselves? What are they worth? Nothing. And they know it. It's a piece of paper. And this is why everyone needs to be ready for this. We see the Russian-led Shanghai Cooperation Organization is gaining more weight. Putin is out there saying that a dozen new nations are now showing interest in cooperation. Russia is also saying that they're considering issuing debt in Chinese yuan in the coming years, which will facilitate Russian corporate borrowers access to the Chinese market. In general, the study of the Chinese market's opportunities is currently underway. So they're getting prepared. I mean, the yuan is right now going to be voted on to be a reserve currency. Many countries have bilateral trade agreements with China. A lot of countries have hubs where they're dealing in yuan and renminbi. And a lot of countries are protecting themselves by dealing in other currencies besides the dollar, because they realize the dollar is collapsing. And when it does collapse, those countries will be ready to go. The United States, not doing it. The United States will fight to the bitter end. And when I say the United States, it's the government/central bankers. They will fight to the bitter end to keep the dollar among all the countries. And if they can't, they will start a war. And this is what we're seeing right now. Now, a couple of reports ago, I talked about mandatory vaccines and how Florida, California, they were pushing for everyone to get a vaccine. And we understand that California's Senate passed SB 277 that would eliminate exemptions from vaccines. A bill in Florida was introduced. This was back in May 1st of 2015. The Vaccinate Child Act of 2015 and the Representative Frederica Wilson. The bill in Congress defines federal mandatory vaccination statewide. She is called into question right now because it seems that she has ties to pharmaceutical companies like GlaxoSmithKline. She also has links to Abbott Laboratories. And it seems that every time we hear a government employee, should I say, I don't even like using the word official anymore, government employee, it seems that they always have connections to private corporations. And it seems like their agenda is always backed by that corporation. And we know this is going on throughout Congress, and this is why this cannot be allowed, because this is really bribing someone, paying them off to do their bidding. And we see they're trying to push this through. And again, what the government and what these corporations are doing, they are removing choice, the freedom of choice. So you will have no choice anymore. You cannot say, I don't want you sticking something into my arm. I do not want you injecting poison that I do not believe in. Because if everyone else wants to be vaccinated, that's fine. That's your choice. But then you are protected. Right? This is what they're telling you. You're protected if you get that. If I decide not to do it, this is my responsibility. This is my choice. But you don't have to worry about me because you are protected. But we know for a fact that vaccines really don't protect everyone. We understand for a fact that there's a lot of chemicals, a lot of poisons inside of these vaccinations. And the government has no right to tell us what we can or can't put into our own bodies. Now we see the United States government voted on a new surveillance bill, the USA Freedom Act, which we knew this was going to happen. A couple of reports ago, I said they let the Patriot Act expire. They wanted everyone to feel that, the government is no longer spying on you. And I said this was a build-up to get the USA Freedom Act passed. Because all they're doing right now is transferring who is spying on you. Again, we're in a fascistic society right now. where corporations and government meld into one. So now the corporations will be spying on every single person, and the government can say, we are not spying on you. All we're doing is ordering the information, and they're transferring it over to us. And if they can get CISA passed, guess what? All these corporations are not liable for transferring your private information to the government. This is their agenda. The spying has not stopped. Now again, what they're trying to tell you is that everything is absolutely fine. And it isn't. And we see now that the FBI is saying that violent extremists are turning to encrypted communications and private messaging. They're saying it's growing. The people who are supporting the Islamic State, because there's tens of thousands of these people here in the United States, we cannot follow them. And we cannot follow the domestic terrorists because they are using encryption. And we don't have the ability to break it. So we need the U.S. Congress to help gain access to encrypted data. They want them to pass a law that says you can work with the tech companies, and these tech companies will give them the keys to all of the encryption. And the FBI is saying, listen, once we have the method and the key, we promise we'll just store it away, and when we need it, we will use it. Well, this is the same thing as saying, listen, give us the keys to your house, give us the keys to your cars, give us your combination lock from the safe that you have in your house, give me all your passwords, and the FBI will hold it for you, and we'll only use it when we need some type of information from you. Would you do that? No, you wouldn't. You would not let a government agency have your keys. Well, this is what they want you to do, and this is what they want all the companies to do. And this is why you need to protect yourself, just like you protect your home. If a burglar finds a way to open your door with maybe a dual set of keys, you change the lock. If the government is trying to read your email, your text, you use encryption. And if you don't have the ability to use encryption, you use other products that will protect you, which will stop them from tracking you. One of them is Pocket. You can use that. They're little cases. They're built with copper, nickel, silver. It's interwoven into a fabric. You can slide your phone or your credit card into these packets, and it will shield it from outside signals. It will also protect you from the radiation of the phones, because we know all of these cell phones emit radiation. So there are certain ways which you can protect yourself. And at this point, we can see the government is not going to stop spying on the people. They're not going to stop whatsoever. And this is why you need to use encryption or some other method like blockitpocket.com. We see the FBI. They have been operating a fleet of surveillance planes. The equipment is generally used without a judge's approval. Well, we see this a lot where they're using the Stingray devices, they're using the surveillance planes, they're spying on everyone, capturing their email, their phone calls without any type of warrant, violating the Fourth Amendment. And now we see that the FBI has private companies flying over cities, taking pictures, listening in on phone calls, tracking people, and all of this is being done, and it is a violation of your rights. The government is no longer for the people. The government now is working, and always has been working, for the central banks and the corporations. But what's happening at this point in time, it's accelerating. We're noticing it more and more. We're calling them out on it. And they're being caught in this situation where, yeah, we're doing it, and what are you going to do about it? This is what's happening right now. Because if you see, has anyone gone to jail for violating the rights of the people? Has anyone been held accountable? Nothing. When we had the complete meltdown in 2008, any bankers gone to jail? Yeah, they received these minuscule fines of, billions of dollars, especially when they took in trillions. It's meaningless. But this is not going to stop them. It's a joke. So we can see right now, the government employees, they don't care anymore. They're doing it right in the open, and they're lying to every single person. We see the United States government central bankers, they're continually pushing color revolutions. One is happening in Macedonia. And we see the patriots in Macedonia are now winning and defeating the color revolution. Usually when there's a color revolution, it's a small group of paid protesters. We see Soros is backing another color revolution. And they try to get other people involved in this. But mainly it is a small group. The opposing side, which are the people who are loyal to the government that was elected, is usually much bigger. And when the corporate media shows this, they always show tight camera angles to show that, oh, look, there's tens of thousands of people, when really there's maybe 1,500. And we can see in Macedonia, they're saying, no, we know what this is. This is a color revolution, and we're going to stop it. We are not Ukraine. You're not going to be doing the same thing. Now, Russia's foreign ministry is calling on the United States to make public any evidence it has from last year's crash or shoot down of MH17. They're saying that the United States had satellites right above the area, focused in on this area. They had AWACS planes flying around recording what was going on. They're saying Ukraine had satellite imagery, and they're calling upon the United States or Ukraine to publish what they saw. Now, of course, they're leaving this now on the United States to come up with some type of excuse of why they can or can't. But again, as we know, this plane was shot down by the Ukrainian forces. They had a plane, a jet fighter, flying behind the Malaysian MH17. The air traffic controller told them and maneuvered them into this route right over the battlefield. They told them to fly at a certain altitude. And we know that Ukraine, the United States, and other countries have this agreement that the information will stay secret. And if any one of these countries wants to reveal any of these secrets, any one of these countries can veto it, and it will stay a secret. And we can see right now, they are prepared to hide all the information, so they don't want the truth out there. We see heavy fighting still in Donetsk, and right now there is a battle near the airport of Donetsk. Heavy artillery and tanks are in this area. Ukraine forces not abiding by the Minsk II agreement whatsoever. Even Ukraine's general staff admits, yes, they had to use artillery banned by the Minsk agreements. And they're building up right now that the southeastern people are making and maneuvering a major offensive in Ukraine. The propaganda is flying wild at this point. And they're saying that the southeastern people are getting ready to attack. So basically what this tells us is they're preparing a false flag event. Because why in the world, if we use a little bit of common sense, if the southeastern people were pushing the Kiev forces back, they were almost into Mariupol, they were on their way towards Kiev, why would they retreat? And if they want to include Russia into this propaganda story, Why would Russia retreat at this point in time and let Kiev rebuild their forces? Why would they allow the United States to come in and train the Ukrainian forces, to bring in lethal weapons so they can attack again? It makes no sense. No, what this is about is that Ukraine was losing. They didn't have the soldiers. They didn't have the capabilities. So they had to agree to the Minsk II agreement. And now they're in the rebuilding stages. They believe that they're ready to go after the southeastern regions and then Crimea. This is why there is a run-up to all this propaganda, because propaganda always leads the main event, and this is what we're seeing right now. We see the U.S. fighter jets stationed in Europe could be, in the foreseeable future, be used to safeguard the airspace of 4 countries, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. If an aircraft commandeered by terrorists appears in the Czech airspace or a Russian military plane mistakenly crosses in, then the U.S. fighter jets could scramble and deal with the intruder now. Until now, U.S. fighter jets that are stationed there could only be seen flying regular sorties in Polish airspace. The new plan allows them to go ahead and intercept in 4 of these states. These countries, I should say. So we can see they're getting prepared. They're getting ready. We see the U.S. destroyer Ross is leaving the Black Sea after their length of time. We see the French warship Deploy de Lomé enters the Black Sea. I don't know if I completely messed up that name of the ship, but it is a broad-spectrum radio electronic surveillance ship. Specifically, it is equipped and has the capacity for intercepting telephone calls and emails, and that is now sailing into the Black Sea to have it there to spy on what's going on in Ukraine. And I believe the French had a surveillance ship there when the last offensive started. So we're seeing the same exact play-up, and we're seeing the same things happening that happened at the last offensive. We see the people in Japan do not want the United States building this replacement base in Okinawa. But the United States government and the Japan government is saying that this is for your safety and your security, and we're going to do it anyhow. It doesn't matter what the people are saying. We're going to do it. Period. And they are. Because they're going to bring in more advanced weapons to get ready to contain China. This is what it's all about. I mean, if we look at the NATO exercises that have occurred around Russia since 2014, there are 14 of them. And these are all in the Baltic states. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, Georgia, Norway, Sweden, all participating because of the Russian threat. They are preparing. We see Russia right now is going to deliver the S-300/400 surface-to-air missile defense system to Iran by 2016. We see Iran may use the Turkish Stream to deliver gas to Europe after the sanctions are lifted. Again, Russia making deals with all the countries. Not war, economic deals. China making economic deals. The U.S. pushing war. We see out in the Middle East, the U.S. is trying to talk to the Houthis to surrender, to allow the exiled president back into the country. And the Houthis disapprove of the U.S. mediation. They're saying, no, we don't agree to this. They did this with Assad, with the Geneva II talks. Oh, we're talking peace. And the only thing that was on the table was Assad to step down. Well, they want the Houthis to lay down their weapons and surrender. That's it. That's the deal. We see in Syria, they're using the propaganda that Assad is cooperating with the Islamic State. They're saying that Assad is cooperating with the Islamic State. Why? Why is he doing this? Because they're trying to kick out the Free Syrian Army. So Assad now is teaming up with the Islamic State because they've been buying cheap oil from them. I mean, this is the worst propaganda I have heard. I mean, they came up with something absolutely ridiculous. They're saying the current cooperation is primarily military in the battle against other rebel militias, especially the coalition. This strategy is coordinated with the Assad regime, which is continuing its airstrikes on Aleppo. Assad's goals are to prevent the Free Syrian Army from conquering the city of Aleppo. This makes no sense whatsoever. So he's going to team up with the Islamic State, who took over 50% of his country, who's killed civilians, who's taken over the infrastructure, and now he's teaming up with them. When we know the Islamic State is a proxy army for the United States, Israel, UK, and other countries. We know that the Islamic State receives their supplies from the United States and Israel and the UK at some points. We also see that the Free Syrian Army defects as soon as they're trained right to the Islamic State. This is the worst propaganda I have heard. And we see the son of a high-ranking advisor to Erdogan, a captain in the Turkish intelligence, a pilot named Majid Kamal, is now with the Islamic State. Majid Kamal regularly drops what he's told is medical equipment into Syria. However, he's really dropping military equipment, rockets, mortar rounds, and ammunition. And his real job is flying logistical resupply for the Islamic State units, operating against Syria. There are up to 24 separate groups, some with a dozen members or fewer, fighting against the government of Damascus. A ranking Iraqi security officer tells a very interesting story. He says the U.S. has on 2 occasions offered direct air support for Iraqi army operations. Each time, the Islamic State was waiting with an ambush, and the U.S. was nowhere to be found. We see Assad is building up troops to defend Damascus. He has around 7,000 right now, trying to build up to 10,000, and a lot of Iranian soldiers are involved in this. Because the United States government central bankers are coming for him. And this is why they're building up the propaganda. Marie Harf is out there saying the U.S. will never, ever back a brutal dictator like Assad. So we can see right now, they are ready with the propaganda. They're ready to go in. And we know their mission is to get into Syria. And if the P5+1 talks don't work, they will then maneuver their way into Iran. There are reports right now coming from an ex-U.S. Senate candidate, Mark Dankoff. He says Israel is preparing to carry out a false flag operation in the United States, which it will blame on Iran to get the United States into war with Iran. He said, I have maintained from the beginning that Israel is planning and will in some point attempt a false flag incident, probably within the continental United States, that will facilitate Israeli intelligence and falsely blame on Iran. And we know that Iran is going to receive the S-300/S-400 air defense missile systems in 2016, and there's only a short period of time that a false flag can occur, because with those missile systems, it will make it very difficult to wage an attack on Iran. And I would be surprised if there was a false flag event. And I think they're building up for many different ones. And if there is one, it's going to be, and it's going to have to be, horrific, to convince everyone that Iran did this. Now the question is, why would Iran all of a sudden do this? What would be their reason? They're in P5+1 peace talks. They see their sanctions, they're going to be lifted. They see they're going to be making economic deals around the world. Why would they want to start a war? Because if they use and let's say they plant a dirty bomb someplace here in the United States, and it is blamed on Iran, why would they want the United States, Israel, UK, and all the coalition forces coming into Iran? Why would they want this? Because they know they would not be able to win this. It's not possible. And we know that Russia and China would back them. This would start World War III. Is this the path they're setting up right now? Because this is what it will happen. This will cover up the economic collapse. So we're going to have to watch this situation. We know there's been drills. We know there's been dirty bomb drills in Michigan and California. They're having many other drills that are coming up, like Jade Helm. And all this might be in preparation for what is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.